Okay, so I'm probably a little rusty this morning, but I wanted to talk this morning and revisit ego and look at how it impacts how we are in the world, our performance in the world, whatever the setting might be. And I start from the premises I'll always say that the ego is not bad. It's a necessary part of who we are, but it is the self with which we engage and interact with the world in which we live. But it's challenging. It presents us with challenges and it requires mindful discernment to manage it skillfully. And we know why it's challenging. It's challenging because it clings to this notion of a special, permanent self which must be protected, inflated, accepted, aggrandized, and so forth. And it keeps us from seeing that our sense of self importance is a delusion. It's not who we really are. We work hard to see ourselves as we want to be. This mask we talked about before I went away. As we think the culture requires us to be, as we think others in our family requires us to be, not as we truly are. Somebody's not muted there. And in my life before I seriously engaged with this practice, I was just slave captive to my ego. And it resulted in my world being very small. It was all about me. I was fully engaged in this exhausting and persistent task of protecting my ego, making it presentable to myself, making it presentable to the world, trying to prevail in every situation. And I clung to these notions of pride and false standards such as perfectionism. It undergirded my pride as pride and ego go hand in hand. I was consumed by judging myself. I was consumed by judging others, seeing every interaction as a competition, seeing where I was in the pecking order, and as a result, I suffered greatly. I suffered constantly. I lived in a constant state of anxiety that I would fail at any of all the tasks that the ego demanded because it was all about me. What if my false self mask that we talked about a few weeks ago fell off? If I lost, if I was found to be less than perfect than I thought I should be? The threat of shame just hung over me, that I might be discovered for, being defective and not as I wanted the world to see me. And this is the price we pay for living in a consumption-driven, individualistic, competitive culture where we are constantly being judged by these superficial outside attributes. We become dependent, we become addicted to external validation. We want recognition, we feel we deserve it, but there's no real regard or no affirmation of our inner qualities and the acceptance of all the parts of ourselves, skillful and unskillful, pretty and not so pretty. I talk in my book about how during college I sought to present myself as being, wearing the best clothes, belonging to the coolest fraternity, driving the coolest car, having the most beautiful girlfriend. And I lived in a constant state of anxiety that I would lose at any time these so-called trappings of success or attractiveness. Someone would have, be cooler than me, a prettier girlfriend or whatever, which of course always happened, causing me much anxiety because we're always comparing mine and always finding that we don't meet these external standards. We tie our self-worth to external standards, to the superficial trappings of success. We become prisoners of the ego and we suffer accordingly. So this is why discernment and skillful management of the ego is so important, because the ego is also a source of emotional reactivity. When we get triggered into anger, jealousy, resentment, avoidance, envy when the ego is threatened in any way. When we live through our egos, we're always vulnerable to getting triggered. We fear getting close to others, lest they see past our mask. It's a true defective self that we think we have, that we use reactivity to keep others at bay. So the bottom line is when we live governed by the ego, the world is a very unforgiving place. When we live governed by the ego, the world is a very unforgiving place. It's always waiting to catch us, unawares with our guard down. And I first noticed a change from from the practice as a result of the practice with regard to my public speaking. When my previously my anxiety was due to my ego concerns about my performance when it was in a public speaking situation. It was all about me. It wasn't about the message. It was all about how my performance was. And as the ego began to lessen, as I got more aware of it, and to have less a toxic hold, I relaxed when speaking or teaching, as it became more about the material that I was presenting and less about me and my performance. My performance shifted, and I became aware of this from wanting the recognition for the performance, fearing I would not get it, to clearly delivering the message I was trying to convey, because I was beginning to reduce the role of the ego or the me in the equation, which lessened my anxiety, lessened my suffering. So, how much do we limit our creativity, our effectiveness, our authenticity because we get bogged down in ego based concerns? Because when we experience ego-based performance anxiety, a number of symptoms arise. If everything we do is about a performance, fear, worry, apprehension, embarrassment, self-doubt, all of which are sources of significant suffering. And they negatively affect our ability to focus on the task and do it well. Other ego-based symptoms include negative thought patterns, self-criticism, perfectionistic expectations, a heightened fear of failure. And the result is this cycle of fear, which reduces our self-confidence. We need to notice when these experiences arise as they signal us to pause and examine the role of the ego in their origin. When we are free to work on accepting these unwanted private experiences as they are, rather than trying to avoid or fight them. And when we do so, we loosen the grip of the ego on our interactions with the world, whatever the context. Okay, it is additionally helpful to add in some self-compassion practice, including seeing ourselves as we truly are, responding compassionately to all of our self-critical parts, and cultivating humility. Humility is a wonderful antidote for the demands of the ego. So let me say again, ego is not the enemy, but if we passively let it control our lives, if we passively let it drive the car, we are going to suffer. So as one of my teachers characterized it, we set an intention to be humble in our aspirations, gracious in our success, and resilient in our failures. So let me leave it there and let's talk about ego and performance.